Work. So many of you know who've attended our meeting. I heard Kurt Surrett in the back. So I've got a special picture in the back there for you, Kurt, as I go through my thing. But one of the things is we started moving forward with this part of, what we see every day, the things that we shake our head, we scratch at. So, it's the stuff we can't make up, and it's just the facts. So last year when I was doing the same presentation for the NAMS virtual meeting, I used the old quote from Joe Friday, it's just the facts. And things that we have to realize is that with just the facts is that we use our training and knowledge to identify deficiencies that could save someone's life and the vessel's integrity. When the surveyor is held accountable for not reporting the obvious and using the tools and being knowledgeable goes a long way defending your report. And I see old Chip Kinsey on there. So Chip, you would probably have a big old chuckle this as you're a sailor as you are. Just go ahead and insist on your right of way. And I did one of these one day and I did not win. And it was not a very good situation. And the insurance company was very good to their customer. But so looking at as we're going into the futures, we talked a little bit about yesterday, and I always try to find out who the next Darwin Award candidate would be. And so this one is a pretty good one. As many of you might have seen this posted on Facebook. This is a Tesla recharging center, which we'll start seeing along the waterways, which just like along with lithium ion batteries, we will not see the best results, I hope, but this is going to happen. So I think this is a pretty good candidate. And then here's another dumbass decided to back his boat and fill it up with cockpit of water. And then his boat did end up sinking. Unfortunately, not sure where that came from, but it says Fish Cabo. So I'm assuming that it was in another part of the world. So last year, my notes and stuff is the funny things is, welcome ashore, it floats as machinery, and then it has to have minimum safety equipment. Well, damn it, they didn't send another one get posted this year, just recently, and here's the next version of it. A stainless steel bow, it's got a 4 Lehman motor, and it's got a direct drive transmission, and it runs off of diesel fuel out of a 5-gallon can jury can. There's the intake exhaust to the motor, and there's the box of tools they need to keep this thing afloat. I think it's pretty creative and ingenuity. And back to Hurricane Irma and Maria, the extraordinary circumstances, which I always think is pretty cool to whip this picture up, because those of us that did do a little bit of travel during those times got to see this. And we also got to see some of the similar events in Hurricane Sandy or Superstorm Sandy as it came along the coast. So it's always good to have a reminder of, things that when they really are bad. And then I do not know where this came from, Mike, but I think it came on your side of the pond. Pole dancing, that was a great name for it. I figured, that's super extraordinary high tide or tornado picked that boat up and just impaled it on top of that piling. And this one here, I just made fun of this one because it says, you forgot to check the through hole. I'm seeing through holes leak like this, and looks like an old IOR boat or IMS boat from Europe. This one here is a true dumbass. And I hate to use the word this, but so June 7th, I get a phone call from the insurance company that there was an excavator that slipped off of a barge. This barge was a steel top with steel tracks, and it was trying to move the barge in the storm. So when I get there, there's a wrecker, and the next morning there's the crane. It was in the shipping port of Morehead City. And so they had to do a heavy lift type of operation from shore, which they had to drag it from 40 feet of water depth. And so, we worked through this one pretty diligently. However, 3 weeks later, the same company, as the arrow is pointing, is to his little excavator sitting on the bottom, where it skid off his barge because he used an open chain and did about $60,000 of damage just to that piling of that dock. I think that was the invoice. And here is the excavator sitting on the trailer. So I wonder if he's still insured or not, but he's still driving pilings and still working on the front. I'm calling this the new norm. I mean, you're seeing all this new marine growth and life and barnacles and oysters that are growing. And some of this stuff, I'm going to zoom this up just a little bit. And I do have a video, which I'm going to show in my meeting in December. But if you see all the growth here, that looks like trees growing. Hold on, let me pull that back down. Growing on that. Well, I have a video that is showing this stuff alive. It looks, I mean, it's a true live organism that is underneath the bottom of this boat that is growing. And then this is what those little critters look like. When I zoom in, all those looks like little miniature praying mantises on the bottom of this boat. And plus it had the water suckers and the water soakers there too, as it was squirting. So back to what Mike said, the past couple of days have been quite interesting. And you always think about, well, what's on the boats for survival at sea? And so as you can see the energy bars, there were 6 of them right there. Has a 5-year shelf life. And, you know, of course it expires like today, 8/22. I asked my customer, there's the 8/22 there. You know, was he going to eat them? He says, maybe if I'm in a dire straits or dire emergency, I probably would. But the best part is I did not know that water had an expiration date on it too. Let me get this back down just to normal size. Sorry about that. So this water here by Daytrex, I don't know where he got it from, but it was packaged in 2017. And now that's a 2022 expiration date. I didn't think water had expiration dates, but according to Daytrex and the Coast Guard, because this has met all the approvals of the CFRs and the U.S. Coast Guard, just like in a life raft, and this is it. So as I told Mike yesterday, I had some good fresh ones for him the past couple of days, and this is what happens when you have a bad maintenance cycle on your coolant. As you can see, the port motor of this old Detroit, she's full of rust, and the starboard one has marginal coolant. The rust did settle out overnight. And then we go up into this is another boat. As you can tell, the one on the left is from the port engine. The one in the center is from the generator, and the starboard one is from the starboard motor. The best we can figure is that somebody decided they had green antifreeze and blue antifreeze and decided to mix the two together. And that's how they came up with the generator antifreeze. We don't know what happened there, but that was in a Legacy 40. And then of course, there's oil samples and oil analysis. You can see the milky milk in the oil, which you see a lot of. It's just, you know, so we got to write it up, and mechanics I hopefully do. And this was as good as it can get with these old boats sitting around as we're seeing. So this was a diesel fuel sample that I took out of the bottom of a filter on a 1 GM Yanmar. And we had to delay the sea trial because it took me a little bit of time to go get a hose and some other fuel. And it looks like I was panning for gold. I was up there in the Klondike looking for some gold, but it was really coming out of the bottom of a fuel filter on a Yanmar. And 2 weeks ago, I was in the yacht club in Hampton, and I didn't get a super great picture, but that picture looked like coconut milk. I put my hands in that fuel. It had no smell of coconut milk, but then down below I find Stabil and every other kind of fuel preservative there was. It was 22 gallons on a hooked in a universal in I think it was a Catalina 34. So stuff we come up across. And of course, the motor had enough fuel to make it from the Hampton Yacht Club to Blue Water's East Yard, and then it conked out, and then we tried to start it up. The batteries wouldn't go because the batteries are loose on the terminals. So it's a little bit of effort. This is what we ended up, and then he got sea tow or towboat to move the boat back to the yacht club. So we ended up killing the survey. This is pretty ironic, is because the fishing vessel grounded after the captain left the wheelhouse while on autopilot. NTSB says. However, the advertisement above there was Argo's 3D forward-looking sonar. I thought that was pretty funny because sometimes you just have to add a little bit of humor in the job we do. Unfortunately, I don't think he had 3D sonar. He probably got distracted getting a cup of coffee, and his vessel ended up on the rocks. And then back to the observe and report. So this boat was 2 days ago now. And this fellow here, I don't think he'd ever looked in there. I surveyed this boat 4 years ago when he bought the boat. And I didn't have that picture there, but you can see where the rods come through there. Nice set of rods. Nothing was contaminated in that compartment. And here's the aft end of that compartment. And you can see the water lines. You can see the brand new bilge pump. You can see the shower sump, the black hoses. And then on the right-hand side or the left-hand side of this picture, you see this black stain. And we still haven't figured out where that stain is, but my customer said they were going to go look for it to make sure there was got. Same vessel again. Why was this plug in there? Let me pull this plug up. The old plumber's friend, plugging a hole. So we got into the inspection a little bit, and the customer said, you know, the generator never worked just right after we bought the boat. So I said, okay. So we looked at it. So if you look here, I'm going to draw my arrow right around here. You see this nice 2-inch hose that comes from the exhaust from the generator underneath, up and over top, and then overboard out that hose. Well, the way the generator was mounted, the hose came out the back side of the generator against the bulkhead. It ran down and underneath of the generator to the muffler and then out the top. It had a 3-foot minimum lift to get out the top. And so when the mechanic got there, it said the motor had hydrolocked and that all the injectors had to be replaced and the fuel pump had to be replaced. And my opinion is that the manufacturer did a pretty poor installation. And here is the muffler and the hose that comes from there. I suggested to my customers to move that over to the starboard side of the engine room, get a little bit of a playing field and reduce the amount of backflow pressure to that or hydrolock and chance of hydrolock the generator. I think he has more issues than that. Another day for bilge pumps. Emergency bilge pump, you flip it on, you get the forward bilge pump, the aft bilge pump, and the middle bilge pump does not work, which is the engine room. And also the high water bilge alarm was not working also when we tested this. Another catastrophe, there's the high water bilge pump, the high water bilge pump float switch, and then the bilge pumps in the back, but they added another one in which both did work. However, the high water bilge alarm did not work. This one here is check your power company. So same boat, hate to pick on this one boat. It was just too good not to talk about it. So I saw a little bit of a green patina. The zincs were gone on the starboard side of the boat. There's still a little bit left over on the port side. So as always, we get to the dock, hooked up the neutral in the ground, and we had 21.6 volts going between the neutral and the ground. Of course, when we go to the power pole, and I didn't get a picture of that, the city's meter was on top of it, and the door that opens up to the receptacle panel, we could not open it and access it because they had it locked. So we couldn't even test to see whether it was on the city side or the dock side power. And this was the second we took. We took multiples here, and that was 23.41 volts. This is one that everybody has seen at some point in time, like straight current and what a hot dock does. This was in the boatyard that we hauled out the short haul with yesterday. And this was a boat that the guy was wondering why he was having straight current issues. And of course, he didn't. They didn't know what happened. So my good friend Bill Zobel, as he sends me pictures like most do for the You Can't Make This Up during the year. As you can see this bass panel, hopefully y'all can see this. But if you look at follow the string, the string goes all the way back to the port light and loops back around and comes back to the outlets receptor panel. So not only was the main breaker held open with the string, they tied it tight so that the outlets will stay open too, because he kept having incidental brake tripping. And then Charlie Uzuri sent me this picture. Says, oh my, I just noticed I had vibration. That's a pretty good one. Charlie didn't explain what happened, but it looks to me like he hit some rocks or something kind of fun like that. And this was pretty good. The new style of trim taps. I don't know. I had a pretty good laugh about this, thinking that how could the amount of pressure, what pound shock did they have? 15, 20, 30 pounds? And did it have any impact on the performance of the vessel? Not sure about that one. And then this one here, Charlie sent me this one too and says, how many things do not comply. And I wonder if the switch is ignition protected, because when you see where it's mounted, you will wonder if you have a little bit of an arc, what will happen. So here we're at, this is, I think, on one of the tests I've seen that I took with, I became a SAMS member. This was a very familiar test to me. One was wing nuts. You've got your blue and your brown wire, which don't meet your normal ABYC standards. Then you've got the battery switch, which is sitting on top of the vent of the acid. So you know that's doing really good, that acid on charge is really cooking the backside of that switch. And then you see that's an ill-fitting battery box, no straps. And then right at the top corner is the valve for the fuel tank. I think that one there does not comply very good. And then this one here is compliant or not. The rules say you've got to have 2 hose clamps. However, the rules, I've read those again the other day, which we'll be talking about later on in another time, is that these are 2 T-bolts and they're using a wire with a clamp to the stuffing box. We write that up, is it's recommended to have a second hose clamp on there. It's not required, but it is a recommendation. I'm not sure who is an outboard in our group today, however, but this was a big issue for my outboard mechanic the other day, because the hub on this propeller has slipped. The center of the tabs are supposed to be in the center with the equal distance between both sides. So he made that as a standard. And then when we pulled the drain plugs out, and the question was, where was the oil? I have a small short video of about 12 seconds of a steady stream of water pouring out of that. And that was a Yamaha 350. And the mechanic said that is a normal for the 350s, Yamahas. However, what causes the water, whether it's bad seals, this boat had just made a 200-mile boat ride from Edisto, South Carolina to Morehead City for this survey and for the purchaser that day. That was Kurt Surratt. I heard you back there a minute ago. So in this survey that I got from a guy in Miami, and the boatyard calls me up and says, hey man, so the surveyor says there's a couple spots here and there's a 24 by 48 void on the port side. And so I went and checked it out for the boys, because they were drilling holes in the bottom, put sonars and gyros in this boat. So I told him, I said, well, I'm gonna tap on the hull. So that day I started on the port side, I found a few spots, and I told him I'd be back on Monday. And as I do my hammering and I start finding areas, I'll take blue tape and I'll highlight these voids that I found in these boats when I do some thermal imaging, and that, because that way it gives me a good reference to go back to. And at this point, I asked my owner, my customer, to this contact Charlie Uzuri from Louisiana, who does thermal imaging, and he came up and helped me with this project after I'd already sent him these pictures. And he came up and said, this is kind of normal for what he does, and that he would love to come to North Carolina just for another type of experience. So so this was my highlighted tapes. So about 2 weeks later, after Charlie left, this is the hull size that they cut out of the side of this boat, after Charlie had drilled the hole in the side looking for what was going on. So one is, we have a lot of poor construction here. We have curves that are not full of resin, and we have a lot of disbonding from the exterior and the interior hull that has caused this vessel to go through a complete transformation. This is the backside of one of the panels that was removed. This was where one of the panels was removed. The builder went and chose to go inside and put a couple layers of mat, which he's a true resin infusion boatyard, so that he was pretty comfortable with doing this type of repair. So the area in which the fella who did the survey in Miami was right underneath of here. It's not sure if you can see this or not with my highlighter or not, but directly almost at the front of that cutout. This is a 67-foot sport fish boat, and they had to remove the whole sides on both boats, about $850,000 worth. This is the resin infusion. So the builder, a smart young builder, he just cut out sections, did a repair, went back, because they didn't want to lose the distortion of the vessel. And while the vessel was in the shop, the owner decided to paint it. He must have really loved this boat because he spent a lot of money to see something like this, which is pretty discouraging. But the builder was pretty comfortable. It's about time to go back and do a final inspection to get this guy back in the water and get him going for the year. But that's you saw the port side, now you're seeing the starboard. And where he came up to the accent part is what he did is he left both sides enough so that he could grind back, do some good solid tabbing in there and clean the old fiberglass out and the fiberglass on the core. Now, this was an interesting conversation when a engine surveyor says the motors are making horsepower. The contract with the boat broker stated that the engine had to make 2375 according to rated horsepower from the manufacturer specifications. The real issue is that nobody decided to do a bore scope, and nobody really evaluated the oil samples that were involved in this. And so we had two cylinders that were scored and scarred as this. This is what the head of that will look with all the carbon buildup. If you look at the cylinder on the left-hand side, you'll see it real white and gray. And the starboard side, you see the pitting in it. It's my assumption, as well as the mechanics, is that this motor had been run on just straight water with no coolant in it because it has no nitrile or any kind of corrosion blockers in the coolant. And as this coolant started breaking down, the motor got hot, and this is why the motor failed, because we had steaming going on the internal part of the motor through the exhaust ports, I think is what he said. But we'll see a little bit more about this. This is a pretty creative wind turbine. I saw somebody making a little bit of gesture to this morning. I thought it was pretty good. It was putting out damn near 17.5 volts. I think somebody was just talking about wind and electrifying boats, and that's how you can homemade do it and get you enough power to keep your charger going. And then, Mike, this is something that really is starting to hit home in the States, as you're starting to get these European boats coming into the States with SIN numbers and HIN numbers, and we're getting double issued numbers. We talked a little bit like that last year. This is a Neptunus, and the Neptunus had two numbers on it. This was the second number to NCL. Mike, how much more time do I have?
As much as you want, really. I mean, another 10, 15 minutes if you need it.
Okay, no problem. I've got it. It's the good stuff, as we talked about before, And so here's a Horizon yacht. Horizon has two distribution points in America. And we've talked about this before. This will also be discussed when we talk about HIN numbers at a later date. But, you've got this HYI number, and then you got the HRN number, both of which are issued to one in Pasadena. And then we go to the old classical original Rybovich, and this was the original hull ID number on this vessel in 1972, which I thought was pretty cool to see that vessel. And then I don't know who's done an island packet or Pacific Seacraft, but they put theirs in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you read the rules of the CIN, you can put your hull ID numbers on the port side of the transoms. Didn't know that until I started doing some research on HIN numbers and that type of information. One of the facts that we deal with every day, and I'm seeing more and more of it, is the lack of mast lights and use of more all-around lights. So we have to keep in our back pocket this little, remember that boats under 40 feet can use an all-around light and the red and greens as their proper lighting. The power vessels have, over 40 feet have to have a mast light, stern light, and port and starboard. But there's a height requirement between the mast light and the running lights, and it applies not only just to the under 40, but it also applies to the over 40. And sailboats, they live in their own world, but they do have their own set of running light standards. So the one that I really want to talk with the Coast Guard and the ABYC at this winter's meeting is about these damn stupid ass running lights, where when one light bulb burns out, that has 5 and that has 5. And when does it lose? When is it not compliant? And then I call this is the old corrosion from the pot metal. And then this is the one I did just recently. Where's the light? It's called hide and seek. So they put a red and white light, idiot light. It's about 1/2 inch tall, right in front of the light bar on top of the hard top, in which when the boat runs up on a plane, you'll never see the running light of that. I did write that up. The builder did raise it up high enough so when you saw it. Another hide and seek is if you look at the anchor light or all around light underneath of the console, which is kind of normal for the guys around here because they can maintain it. They think it keeps it out of the water. But of course, you've got a FLIR camera, a bar light, so it's not going to do you any good when the bar light's on. And then when you go around the back side of it, you see your anchor light because you're supposed to have 360-degree unobstructed vision of that light. And this one here is obstructed because of the seat. And there it is on the side where I got the outrigger arm laid in. I guess these boats run fast enough that the lights and stuff are pretty solid on that. This was a new hard top. Sorry about this, but the mast light and the anchor light on the same pole. And they just they don't even get above that. And also it's supposed to be 1 meter of separation between the anchor light, the mast light, and the running lights, which are in the corner. So that was definitely an issue. The guys with the running lights are creative. They'll put them on top of best mounted to the top of their radar dome. Fire extinguishers, as we all know, that's just a big headache for all of us. I'm gonna skip down to some of my favorites. You got 2 fire extinguishers in the step. I didn't know they were in the step until I found the boat. Readily accessible is the rules. This was in the cockpit cabinetry all the way in the back of the cabinet, just like this one was too, in cabinetry. Underneath of the galley, which just says the rules say you got to have one in the galley. So you look for the galley one and it's buried. But the one in the galley, is that the one? No, this is the one that was in the head. For some reason, it wasn't there. This is the one, this fire extinguisher was in a forward bilge of a motor yacht, which you had to go into bilge, you had to raise the hatch up. And who in their right mind is going to go in the hatch and put a fire out? And there's a fire extinguisher in there. That ain't going to happen. And the washer and dryer right above it. Brand new installation this year. The vendor said he could not get the shorter fire suppression bottle because it was not available. But I see this being a true disaster because right underneath of this is his new gyro that he put in. And there's your generator. So what happens when the mechanic's in there changing the water pump, which is right here at the end of the generator, or changing the belt out right here at the end of the generator. And that is right there in the middle of where you have to work. And I explained that to the upfitter. And then we're back to the minimum of 28 inches to the power head. And this made it at 24. However, the way the nozzle is spraying straight up into the overhead and not some kind of directional flow into the engine room. There's another one that does not comply. It's just right in the forward bilge. These are these fixed systems that are installed. Let's see here. This was a refit on a Hatteras Sportfish this winter. It was a 60. You've got 2 brand new gyros in the forward engine of the engine room. Then you've got his refrigeration on the port side of the jet. And then you have his fire bottle that was there, which is behind the exhaust pipe. And I'm not really sure how the 175 or 200 degree fire is going to trip that, especially when it's sucking air out. Installation of pull handles, it's getting to be challenging to find out where they do it, on whether they work. And where's it? Oh yeah, I like this one. And I look for this a lot. Is you've got intake blowers and you got fire suppression bottles, and intake blowers or outlet blowers are not anywhere. They're not connected to a automatic shutoff system. The one I showed you last year mounted underneath the shelf. This is mounted on the outboard side of the custom sport fishing boat. I know that one would never put out that fire. This one here, there's your blowers. This was in our new motor yacht. So, and they did test that with the fire suppression company. And life rafts. according to the rules, say, life rafts are supposed to be able to be deployed, but I don't think that one was self-deployed because of it's mounted directly tight to the rail. And then this was on a sailboat because they don't have anywhere else to put it. It's directly underneath the hardtop. The grill on the lazarette, the wind vane is on the port side, and the dinghy is being towed directly behind it with the ladder that goes in the water. And I asked my customer, the seller of the boat, I said, man, have you ever tested this to see if you can actually kick this overboard and it work? He said, no. And I said, why not? Because he had two dive bottles. He had more shit in front of the life raft than he did behind it. So there was no way and it did not have an automatic discharge. And this is what happens when you have improper installed life rafts. They wrap up antenna towers or other type of running gear in that. See here, high water bilge alarms, the notorious enemy. That's a brand new 2021 sport fishing boat with no high water bilge alarm in it. This is a 2020 sport fish boat. Well, no, this is a little motor yacht, and it didn't have a high water bilge alarm in it. And the owner wanted to know why. Now, I'm not sure about EPIRBs and how they're supposed to be registered, but I've never seen an EPIRB registered to the owner of the boat. I've seen them registered to the vessel, but never to the actual owner of the boat. And I asked my customer, and this was on the same boat yesterday, I said, who registered this name? He said, my wife took care of the paperwork. I said, well, you're going to be getting a phone call. And then you put these EPIRBs all over the boat because they say, well, it's where my nav station is. Rail accessible throwing devices, not where you can find them. Cracked hoses or cracked cords, recalled carbon monoxide detectors. This is the best. I think every Grady White I go on, main ship and a couple more, that you always see the wire or you don't see the guts. But they have a shelf life of 10 years and they start to beeping and nobody will take that apart and send it to the right. You get it, the new one. Propane tank installation. This is the one, that same sailboat I did, Hylas. So you had a nice bottles stored, proper location, got a valve in the back. Everything was working fine until I opened up the aft locker and there was the third propane bottle. And then as I opened up the other side, there was all the gas bottles. Now I think somebody, who was that you're talking about? It was John, I think, was talking about yesterday when he had his CO detector and all those detectors, gas detectors. I would imagine he would have probably really had they would have gone off because it was nothing but a smell of solid gas coming out of there. And the emergency tiller was buried underneath of all this gear. Batteries, back to the same stuff again. Diesel fuel caps on a sport fish boat was labeled gas, but one of them, this one here, now that was the one that was labeled gas, but it was for the water tank. And the one that was underneath the step was labeled diesel fuel, which was for gas. Tugboat maintenance. There's a bilge pump, wire nuts laying in the bilge of water. And then this is what I really like. I want everybody to understand the assignment. Our job is not always peaches and cream. And as we move forward with this, it says, how do you feel it today? I did my job and now this. And if you read that, you'll have a big chuckle about that, walking the plank. So Mike, hopefully I gave a little bit of fun, a little bit of humor today and what we talked about.
I got to tell you, Lloyd, it's absolutely priceless. I'm almost speechless. So I think you have far too much fun putting this presentation together. Absolutely extraordinary.
Well, I get a lot of help from those around. They'll send me pictures and stuff, but everybody has their own day. That's why I said, we start out in the morning and you never know what you walk into. But so you just try to find a little bit of humor and make your day go a little bit better.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Does anybody want to comment on what they've seen? Any thoughts from anybody? Are you as surprised and shocked as I am, or is that what you see on an average week? That's normal, says somebody. Crikey, if that's normal.
Well, see, I think on the other side, y'all a little more stricter on the construction side than we are in the States. You don't have all the type of engineers that we have in our country.
Yeah, that may be the case. But we see the same stuff here, and certainly see it in Europe. And of course, the further east in the world you go, well, you know, standards are just far lower generally. Lloyd, absolutely superb. Thank you very much. Appreciate you doing that.
I don't know. It's always good to participate. So
yeah, fantastic.